I want to start today's show with two statements. First, I want to warn our audience that the contents of this show and this conversation may be upsetting and triggering to many of you. So I advise viewer discretion for those of you who might find details of rape and attempt to murder triggering. Secondly, I want to offer you an unconditional apology. I've said this in the past, that newsrooms and news shows like this one are in the end run by human beings who tend to make mistakes. But it is our responsibility to apologize for those mistakes, own up and issue corrections whenever we make them. Today, I apologize to you as my viewers. I apologize because the case that we're going to look at today took place on the 14th of September, 15 days ago. But it did not receive the attention it deserved from the media. It didn't receive the attention it deserved from me either. And because I didn't give this story the attention it deserved, you, my viewers, were not informed about it as well. And that is my responsibility. And for that error and that mistake, I apologize to you today. Because if we had given it the attention it deserved, this young lady wouldn't have struggled for 15 days for justice and for the medical care that she needed. There were other things going on in the country at that time, but none as important and as grave as the case we're going to discuss today. Let me take you through the details of this case. A young girl of 19, a Dalit girl, was gang raped by 4 upper-class men, allegedly, in Hathras in Uttar Pradesh on the 14th of September. When her mother found her in the field, she was bleeding, she was naked. When they took her to the hospital, eventually they discovered that she had injuries to her spinal cord and her neck that caused paralysis of her entire body, neck downwards, and that her allegedly tongue was cut. She was bleeding from her mouth, from her eyes, and from her vagina. She was admitted to a district hospital, then moved to a hospital in Aligarh, and finally moved to Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi 2 days ago, after which she died. According to reports, doctors say the victim fought hard to stay alive and give the police her statement in which she named her 4 tormentors, who were finally arrested 4 or 5 days after this incident had taken place. But I just want you to just stop for a minute and marvel at the arrogance of the accused, who didn't leave from that village after they had committed this crime. And what does that tell us about the local police? For 5 days, they hung around, obviously assuming that nothing would happen. According to reports, the UP police is now under scrutiny for several lapses in this case, not the least of which is the fact that when the family brought this girl to the police station, she was left out in the sun on a slab of stone when she should have been taken to the hospital. It was the family that took her to the hospital and not the police. When the district hospital recommended she be moved to Aligarh, the police apparently did not help. They didn't register a case of rape until many, many days later, in spite of the fact that she had in fact been admitted in hospital and her injuries suggested rape. They waited until the victim was in a position to confirm rape themselves. Questions that we have to ask today. Nothing has changed since Nirbhaya. There are no fast-track courts. There are no one problem-solving centers, single centers that are supposed to help women in these positions. Police inaction in Uttar Pradesh. Poor medical facilities for someone who has been through such a horrible, horrible experience. Poor justice movement and poor and slow forensic testing. And finally, the state of our society today, that this sort of crime is still happening and not getting the attention it deserves. Joining me on this conversation this evening, Yogita, who is an activist who has worked on the ground with many of these cases. I've actually spoken to Yogita over the last several years about cases that she's been working on, including the Nirbhaya case that she was part of as an activist. Trisha Shetty, who is a lawyer out of Mumbai, who works with families of victims and victims themselves and survivors themselves in getting justice, filing police complaints, getting tests done. Mr. Sharat Pradhan, who's a very senior journalist out of Uttar Pradesh, who perhaps understands the politics of the police in Uttar Pradesh better than anyone else right now, and Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, ex-IPS officer, very senior IPS officer, who will give us an understanding of what the police should have done and what the police actually did do. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us. I'm going to start with Yogita Bhayana. Yogita, I know that you're a little under the weather, but you've been kind enough to join us today. And I know that you would have spent enough time on this case, brutal as it is. Unfortunately, we always speak under these circumstances. There are protests right now, from what we understand, outside the hospital in Delhi, where this young woman has died. But somehow, the protests are quieter than they had been during the Nirbhaya case. There are those who say it's because she was Dalit. Is this a regular occurrence with Dalit women in our country, Yogita?
As of Faye, I mean, as much as my experience goes, it happens. When I try to tell it to my educated friends, urban friends about atrocities on Dalit women, they don't agree with me. But when I go on ground, it happens. Unfortunately, this case came to my knowledge on 20th through my volunteers. After 4-5 days of the occurrence of the particular the case, I immediately called up Hathras police station and then started interacting with them. I was going through my COVID period, so I could not step out and follow up on ground. I'm still in isolation, but I can tell you the 376D was added after so much of my tweets. If you see, I mean, I was constantly calling them. I was constantly following. Then this is the state. I had no idea, to be very honest, and even I'm ashamed and guilty of not being physically present. I wish I was there. I could have seen the reality in the sense of the gravity of the injuries. I would have definitely suggested them to take her to the Safdarjung hospital. But why they have to wait for people like us to reach? This is my question. You know, why not the machinery works the way they should be working, and they should be taking calls like, oh, she cannot be staying in a district hospital, she has to move. I am telling you, she would have been saved. She was moved to Delhi yesterday, but she could have been saved if she was moved to Delhi 4-5 days ago.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the point, why these cases are happening, you know, the state of Uttar Pradesh, we have been discussing this for years and years now. The priority of the government, current government there, which is Adityanath Bist or whatever his name is, so-called Mr. Yogi, his priorities are different. His priorities are not to save the women, not to protect the girl child, or not to protect women of that state. His priorities are different, and I openly condemn that he has not that even he has given one statement, so we should not go political. But at the same time, if the leader is like that, what do you expect will change there? You go 50 kilometers from Delhi, not even 50, 20, 25 kilometers, which I travel a lot towards UP. You will see the atrocities, you know, you will see the whole thing changing, fully changing. You can see evidently how women are treated, especially Dalit girls. I mean, if we have to wake them up, shake them up, it's a big shame on us. I am feeling guilty not being with her, not being physically present. I don't know how these people live with this kind of guilt. They don't even have a guilt. I don't know what they go through.
You know, I want to bring in Sharat Pradhan here. Mr. Pradhan, Yogita said that, you know, he's not made a statement and we don't know how important that is. But the Chief Minister's statement in cases like this makes a massive difference, because it sends a very clear message to the police that this is something that's being watched by the CMO, and it's something that's important and needs to be given attention. In this case, since you are in Uttar Pradesh, what was the behavior of the police? What was the behavior of the state government in this particular case?
Well, I fully agree with every word of what she has said. And knowing the UP police, let me tell you, this is a clear-cut case of the callousness for which I think they are adept in the art of callousness, I would say. Because these things they are not sensitive enough to react positively to such situations, and more so because the victim happened to be a Dalit. And let me tell you, had this, I would agree with what you said in the beginning, and you expressing your guilt about not taking up the case. I really wish that the matter had been taken up by the media, which is more concerned on on the kind of issues that one sees, the frivolous stuff that we are watching these days. I wish it had been taken up. Then things would have certainly been different. Had the girl, as this one Bhayana, she rightly pointed out, had she been shifted on time, she would have been saved. The district hospitals in Uttar Pradesh are pathetic. I know the kind, and a place like Hathras, which is a very, very small district, and there is no way that such a case, which has a girl who has been traumatized so badly, who's suffering from a serious spinal injury, the first thing she should have done should have been taken to AIMS or whatever, or someplace in Delhi, or even something hospital in Delhi earlier. They, shifting her at a point when she was almost dead, that is yesterday, it's just a formality that they did. They had they shown little concern for the poor victim, probably things would have been different. The girl could have been saved if she had been shifted to the right. She had got to the right kind of medical care a little earlier. Since Delhi is close to Hathras, very close, there was no reason why she was kept here and there and not taken to an appropriate place where her life could have been saved. But again, let me tell you, this kind of callousness is visible more in cases like this, where the victim happens to be a Dalit. Had she been a privileged one, coming from a privileged section of society, probably the authorities too would have been more attentive and more sensitive in handling the case.
Well, I also want to bring in Mr. Azad. Mr. Azad, unfortunately, a lot is actually at the doorstep of the police at this point. I shudder to imagine this survivor being left outside in the sun after she had been brought in from the fields. The police saying, "Take her away from here. Don't leave her here. Take her somewhere else." When the family then arranged for an ambulance and took her to the nearest hospital, there seems to be a complete disregard for the family, for the people of this particular caste. Did the police cause her death? Could they have saved her, Mr. Azad?
Absolutely. I'm so ashamed and distressed to hear about this case. I've never seen this kind of callousness. I've never seen this kind of a brazen, disregard to basic, even human values. Forget about the professionalism for which they are never known. I'm really shocked in a case like this, where a hapless woman is brought, and after such a dastardly act which has been committed, the first thing should have been done was to try and attempt saving her life. And that is to have shifted her to there. And as very rightly said by Mr. Pradhan, that the first thing they should have been was shifted to a better hospital, because the quality of hospitals we have in our states are really poor. And Faye, the sad part is that this is the exact route which takes place in cases of even other injuries. They go to the district hospital, the case is spoiled, then they move to the state, they keep on moving because the hospitals also shift their responsibility, by the way, and then they say AIMS.
Absolutely.
And this I have seen during my period. Secondly, I'll tell you another thing which Mr. Pradhan rightly said about the state of the Dalit women. Even during my period in Madhya Pradesh, when I was there as SP, in many rural tracts like Sihor or Mandsaur, etc., it needed always senior supervisory officers to go immediately and make a difference. Otherwise, they would be treated in a very, very shabby manner. Now, in this case, as rightly said, immediately 376D should have been registered, the victim should have been moved to the hospital, and maybe she would have been saved. But what I'm surprised is that the brazenness of these four youth who are hanging around in the village and perhaps expecting that nothing would happen, that because they had even cut off their tongue. This is shocking. I mean, this is not a bad land. I think this is a banana republic. Where are we living? I'm really shocked. But the worst part of all this is that any serious crime of this kind, Faye, especially a gang rape which has taken place, and that also on a Dalit woman, is immediately brought to the attention of senior officers. The first person who's a gazetted officer, the DSP of the area or CO of the area, and in fact, the person who supervises the Dehat, the additional SP, immediately gets this information, and he's supposed to go post haste to that area. The second thing which is required is the forensic team, as you rightly said. In fact, we were talking a lot about the forensic teams, etc., etc. Nothing has happened. And today, even the plan of having every district with a forensic team is not there. So there goes the evidence. Thank God the accused have been arrested, but I'm ashamed that we were not able to save the life of that.
Mr. Azad, we have a question from Amit Kamble. He says police and the hospital hesitated to officially call this sexual assault or rape or bring that section into the charges. Why do you think there is this hesitation?
I don't think there should be any kind of hesitation on that. At least during my period, I had never seen any kind of hesitation. If it happens, it happens, and you have to do it. You have to handle it in a very, very sensitive manner. And police officers are known to have done it also. They always, in fact, immediately they get a case of this kind, they ring in. In fact, if you are well aware, you have a good public interface, you immediately call a lady, in fact, who's willing to come, from the NGO or somebody who's able to facilitate a conversation. If she's not in a good position, you immediately make arrangements and send her to the hospital. You take care of the family. In fact, your responsibility increases in a case like this. I don't know what kind of system is this. And what shocks me even more is Hathras is rightly a very, very, a big city. So all the facilities should be there. Why immediate response? You can't say there's lack of infrastructure. I can imagine if it happened in Dur, Dehat or some police station. But if you have the proximity to a district headquarters like that, certainly things can be better. It just shows that forget professionalism. You're not even human beings if you don't react the right way. And I'm so embarrassed and ashamed, really, that the police has behaved this way.
Ashamed is a good word. I want to bring in, and I think we're all ashamed at this point. And I just want to keep reminding our audience of this. There's been a lot of mindless, in fact, very cruel criticism on Twitter for pointing out the young lady's caste. But we have to realize she was targeted because of her caste. Yeah. And if we fail to take note of that, we are effectively signing off a blank check to the bodies of all Dalit girls. And we would be foolish as upper class women to assume that you and Dalit girls share the same fate in this country, because it's not true. They face a far, far greater risk and a far worse fate. And unless you and I are willing to call it what it is, we cannot hope for any change. It is as simple as that. You cannot hope to change anything unless you're willing to accept the nature of the problem. And the nature of the problem is that the bodies of Dalit women in our country are considered free game for anyone and everyone, because the police looks the other way, the government looks the other way, and it's almost as if they have no agency over their bodies and they have no say about what happens to them. Prabhakar has asked a question. She says, can a case be filed against the UP police for negligence? I want to take that question to Trisha Shetty. There were laws that were written after the Nirbhaya case on what has to be done if the police don't take these things seriously. They're very stringent laws. They're rarely followed, though. Trisha, go ahead.
I just link it to what you were saying earlier about Nirbhaya's case, right? If you remember, during the Nirbhaya case, a lot of the outrage was centered around she could have been one of us, middle class woman aspiring to greater education. And I think what was not implied but understood by everyone when they said one of us was also her religion and caste, right? Um, you will not see the same kind of outrage for when it is a girl that belongs to a Dalit community. Um, that's just the unfortunate reality of where we are as a people. Um, the if you just look at data on the NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau, which they have not released in a few years. But the last released data, it shows to you the crimes against women in general. And within that, there are categories. Scheduled caste women, from the scheduled tribes. And even under that, from the backward caste, Dalit women's bodies are subject to, I think, 90% of the atrocities from the entire community of the backward caste communities. And then, of course, you come to the reasons behind it, right? Like if you seek to move beyond economic structures, then rape is used as a punishment. You also know that you will get away with it, which is what you highlighted. Look, there are laws, but it's also the point of who has access to these laws. So what is the actual procedure supposed to be? If I'm a rape survivor, anyone who's aware of the incident, or if I'm in the state, I go to a police station. Ideally, you say you can go to a hospital first, but that's not true. They prefer you go to the police station. The police station will direct you to the closest government hospital. Someone from the police station will come with you, make sure you're admitted, make sure your medical legal stuff is done. The hospital will get your tests done, make you take off your clothes on a piece of paper, take off your parts underneath your fingernails, swabs from your mouth, from your vagina, comb through your hair. I'm saying all of this because that is the process we follow. Because if there is concerns of rape, you want to take all of that into account. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is because it shocks me that the police chief here, Vikrant, says that the victim's statement wasn't taken till September 19th. The mother has said she spotted her daughter with her tongue wasn't cut out. The girl had to bite her tongue because she was being strangulated. The mother has said in a statement, and I request the audience watching to go read the mother's statement. She has said, she describes in detail how she saw her daughter. There was blood coming out of her vagina. Her tongue had swollen. Her eyes were red. If a mother can identify and have the concept of, oh my God, societal shame. The mother says, I waited for my daughter to wake up and say she's okay saying she's been raped before I said that on record. The first thing the hospital has to do is do a medical legal test, notify the police. They come, they coordinate, they take the statement down. And if the victim is not in a position to make this statement based on her guardian, based on the hospital, findings, you file a zero FIR. Now, this is the procedure. This is the law that the country is supposed to protect you with. Any aberration to the same is a dereliction of duty. And the reason I'm highlighting dereliction of duty is because here we need to hold people accountable. It's despicable that we've come to a place where people like Yogita and you and I have to feel extreme kind of shame. But what do we do with this shame? Nothing. I would much rather we focused on being angry and demand, because the easiest thing they'll do, Faye, watch, this is the common rhetoric, right? The four people who've been accused, they'll say, okay, Fasi pe chadao, Fasi pe chadao, Fasi pe chadao. They'll go onto that bandwagon, and then someone somewhere will get up and say, okay, Fasi pe chadate hai. Or they may do some other ordinance or pass another bill and say, we've made this amendment now to this act, we'll have 2 more fast track courts. They actually don't do anything. I'm sorry, the system has not changed. In Bombay, I still struggle with going to public hospitals, and in these public hospitals, it must be said, there are stray dogs that enter. They will say things like, hey, ye bachche ka rape hua, chal isko leke ja, usko leke ja, kaun dekhega isko. Men will come to try to examine you. There's no concept of dignity left within you, within these institutions, and this is in Bombay. We're talking about, forensic labs. There's no money been given to these forensic labs. They take over a year to give you the test results back of a child who's been raped, when there's provision that says it must be done within 3 months. So what scope of justice do we have? So what I would say is, within this space of anger, what do we do? Because God, quite honestly, I'm frustrated. This is not okay. And People like us, I think, have the luxury of, feeling shame. And today I'm thinking about, oh, by the end of this night, I need to, feel better. But the women on the streets, the mother, I know Asha Devi, she's not going to have the luxury of, switching this off and feeling better. You live through that burden every day. And Asha Devi, I remember when I asked her, "Aap thak nahi jate ho?" She said, "सुबह उठती हूँ, संघर्ष करती हूँ, रात को सोती हूँ, रात को थक जाती हूँ, सोती हूँ, सुबह उठती हूँ, वापस संघर्ष करती हूँ. अगर मेरी बेटी के लिए किसी ने किया था, तो मैं ये, I would not be here." So we have to understand that even if we choose to put an emotional switch off, I'm sorry, there'll still be people fighting. So I think demanding for resignation of Vikrant Veer, the police chief who has abjected his duty, who has failed in his duty and responsibility, demanding for the resignation of all the duty officers who did not take the statements. The mother and the brothers have identified them in all their bravery, very specifically demanding for their resignation, demanding that police action be taken against them, because 164 of the CRPC lays procedure that no officer of the law, no police officer can deny filing an FIR. If he's witness to the crime or if he's aware of the crime. And I think we should just focus on that, because the easiest distraction tactic they'll do is this Fasi pe chadao tactic, where they'll then say we'll give a 2 lakh
compensation.
Yeah. 4 lakh, 2 lakh compensation, and then we will transfer some people, and bas khatam ho gaya, and फांसी पे चढ़ा देते उनको. And the family will then be going through a grueling process of 10 years, going to courtrooms, running out. Their lawyer will say something. This will become a big drama. And then during political rallies, one person will say, "Tumko pata hai tune party mein kya kiya?" So as an audience, we need to focus. We need to shame Ajay Bisht for his complete dereliction of duty, because Ajay Bisht seems to think this is a political opposition ploy. Every time the man is embracing all of his shamelessness, says this is opposition trying to attack my government. So Ajay Bisht deserves to be shamed, deserves to be condemned. If his resignation is a far-fetched dream, I think the least we can hope is to shame him enough into saying, you need to fire these people. There needs to be criminal action taken against these officers, because till the time the fear of the law working is not on these officers. You ask, can we take action against these officers? Sure, I'll go file a complaint. Who will register my complaint? Show me one person who will go file a complaint in Hathras where they'll register the complaint, unless it's high level and politically done. So I think we need to.
So I thank you, Trisha. And I'll come back to you. Erica has asked 2 very important questions. She said, what happens to the family now? Who's going to look after them and make sure they're safe now that people are raising voices? Because based on a report by News Laundry, it says that in this village, there are over 500 members of other castes, but about 15 Dalit families. And this is one of those Dalit families. So will they be safe? That's a very good question, Erica. The second question, Erica says, a stricter law is required for such crimes. And this is precisely the error that Trisha is pointing out. I want to take this question to first Sharat Pradhan. See, the problem is, as viewers, you have to remember this. Every time there is a heinous rape, we all get shocked. We're like, oh my God, we need a stricter law. Our laws are as strict as you can make them. They are very, very strict laws. The problem is not the law. The problem is the implementation of the law. The problem is the attitude of the police. It is the attitude of the doctors who are treating the survivor when she's brought to hospital the first time. The attitude of those like Trisha said, who are gathering the evidence for the rape test and the rape kit that will go for forensics. The attitude of the forensics that take months and months to turn that around. The attitude of the prosecution that drags its feet. The attitude of state governments that don't pay attention and allow the perpetrators to dictate terms on the case. These are the problems. The law is fantastic. There is nothing wrong with the law. Mr. Pradhan, do you believe that Mr. Adityanath, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, needs to be held responsible here? And if yes, why?
Absolutely. Considering the claims that he makes on women's safety and his so-called commitment to ensuring the safety of women, he ought to take some drastic step. As Disha rightly pointed out, the action should be taken against officials for their callous and criminal neglect in such cases. I mean, what was the reason for the case not being lodged until the girl was able to speak? Now, this is the way the UP police works. As I have said a number of times, the problem with the UP police is the gross corruption, rampant corruption, and gross inefficiency. And that is and their interest lies only where they are able to extract money. Where there is no scope for money, as in, apparently in this case, where the victim happens to be a Dalit, they are not bothered.
Mr. Pradhan, before we get into the police, I do want to ask you this because you track politics so carefully.
Yeah.
And this is another question that has popped up. There were more politicians in the center and the state governments across the country who issued, statements of horror at the death of an elephant in Kerala. And I agree the death of that elephant was terribly sad and we were all saddened by it. But why is it that there were more statements made about that elephant than there have been about this girl? Because no statement from the Women and Child Ministry, no statement from Mr. Adityanath of Uttar Pradesh, no statement from the PMO or the Home Ministry or any other ministry. Nobody has said a word.
The simple reason, because wherever they are likely to get any kind of publicity, the politicians jump at that. And in this case, the media too is responsible, because the attention of these politicians gets drawn when such things are highlighted in the media. They get big headlines in the newspapers, which unfortunately this case did not. In case, of course, in papers of Lucknow, it did find, but it didn't find the kind of prominence it deserved. And that speaks volumes of the attitude of our editors as well. And as you had said right in the beginning, if this case had been highlighted on particularly on TV channels or major TV channels of the country, which are busy showing Riya Chakravarti and nothing else, and the Bollywood in so-called involvement in so-called drugs, they had nothing better to. They didn't have time. They didn't give space to a case like this. Then that is the reason that you find rape continuing to happen every by the dozens every month, not even more than that. And this is one case which we are discussing. There have been a number of cases of rape over this very period in different places, in so many times, this in smaller towns, in villages, where such downtrodden people, victims, they are gang raped, they are murdered. Nobody cares about them. Because more often than not, police does not register the case. It is only when such cases are highlighted in the media that they get attention of the authorities, including the police. And of course, politicians then only find time and they rise to the occasion, and then the matter is really taken up seriously. Otherwise, as it has been pointed out, how much so-called compensation that has been given, if compensation makes any sense for a poor family like this. It is 4 lakh rupees that has been given so far, 4,12,000 rupees in this Hathras case. Can you imagine? Simply because it has not got the place that it merited in the media, it did not get. So I think there's a primary responsibility of the media, and certainly of the politician, and more so of the chief minister, who keeps on making tall claims about providing security and safety to women. Every second day there is a press release, and which gets carried very prominently in all newspapers, claiming that he has been able to, the irony is that the government issues a press release claiming that the number of rapes have come down. And they very systematically, they do selective comparison in order to prove their point. That's all.
Mr. Pradhan, if it is in the government's interest to claim that the number of rapes have come down, then that makes sense to the fact that the police would be hesitant to add the rape section to the FIR, because that's how you make sure that the number of rapes come down. You don't register rape.
Yeah,
you birth the cases.
That is the excuse that they more often than not is made by the cops. They say that we cannot keep on increasing our crime figures because he'll be taken to task. And this is a problem of all political, the entire political class. I fail to understand why. And maybe there rarely you come across police officers who say nothing doing, irrespective of the figures going up. Cases must be registered, and that is why
Let me bring in Mr. Azad here. And Tanvi D has put in a question. She says the problem is the gaze with which Dalit rape is looked at by law bearers. I believe she means the police and the politicians at this point. Mr. Azad, if it is in the government's interest to show a lower number of crime or a lowering crime rate, as we've discussed on our previous conversations, there will be a motive to bulk cases. Do you believe that this is what is happening in this particular case? And this would perhaps suggest that there were many, many other cases of rape that were not registered.
See, a lot of very important issues you've raised and the panelists have also raised. Let me try and approach them one by one. You're absolutely right. There is some kind of incentive to bulk crime. And that is because, we give so much of reliance on figures and statistics. Actually, the statistics don't mean anything. And during our times also, often we were told not to bother about the figures and to register freely. But this is a kind of a slogan, Every police station wants that the figures remain under control. And somehow I feel there is a nodding kind of acceptance by the senior officers. But things have changed in certain areas where, bold officers have said, we don't mind registering cases. As far as the rape is concerned, now I get the full import of the question which was asked to me earlier. I understand. One of the reasons the police tries to bulk the rape cases by, considering as something of a mutual consent, and that's worse. But by and large, this is how they approach the first thing. They look at it with great suspicion. But in cases like this, it's a heinous crime. It's an attack on the body. So as Mr. Pradhan is absolutely right, the case should have been registered. The relevant sections, etc., can always be put in later or added later after you get a complete statement from the victim. Now, the second point, very important, I want to talk about the politics of it. And it's a really sad thing. If there were elections around the corner in UP, Mr. Pradhan would agree with me how this case would have been discussed on every channel, every newspaper, with the opposition gunning and, the government defending. And secondly, in a caste-ridden society, the caste of the victim matters, and also the caste of the perpetrators matter.
Also matters, yes.
I belong
Why,
to
Mr. Azad, why do these two pieces of information matter? Would you explain to us?
Why? Because even today in your Bihar elections, even if you're a Gupteshwar Pandey ex-DGP, what we are discussing, it is important which caste are you from and which is the caste-based constituency we can give you. So naturally, once the perpetrators belong to a certain particular area, you can know that the party which has that base in that caste will be a little muted. That's the sad part of it. But the police has to be different.
Reality.
You see, two things I want to talk about. One is the institution. Do you know that the Nirbhay fund utilization, for which 10,000 crores were apportioned in about 2013 with great fanfare. In March, when the Nirbhay accused were hanged in Delhi, the parliamentary committee report said that only 35% utilization of Nirbhay funds was done by the states. So this is the callousness of the states, and the two panelists rightly said, who know much better, only 35% utilization. And do you also know that there were 7 states who have not used any fund at all? And these Nirbhay funds were supposed to be used for Mahila volunteer police. There were 3259 projects which had been, sent from the various states. They were supposed to be, deployed with great fanfare in the various states, and nothing was. And that included CCTV on buses, panic buttons, all kinds of things. And even Supreme Court had given these guidelines. So this is the gross insensitivity part of it. But that's what we are facing. But I'll still tell you one point which Trisha said very rightly: leadership has take the blame. You really have to take the blame. My last point is that certainly things can be done. A simple departmental inquiry on the dereliction of duty can be dismissed on that. Thereafter, you can talk about the criminal, part of it, whether to register a case or not. But these things can be done immediately. And of course, there are a lot of other things which can be followed up in terms of compensation, etc., etc. But right now, we have lost the lives of that particular lady. The least we can do is to hasten up and see that the accused are brought to book. But in the meantime, there should be a lot of questions on a number of issues which were raised. What happened to the forensic teams? What happened to the fast track courts? What happened to the, prosecution guided investigations? These are a host of issues which need to be looked into. And one thing, let me say, whether it's Yogi Adityanath or whether it's any CM, I am neither for Yogi Adityanath nor against him. But I'll tell you something, the situation under any CM will remain the same unless things at the lower level are geared up. And for that, you need governance. Governance is lacking. Governance is lacking in this country. And you see any government, there are, of course, brilliant. No chief minister wants a crime like this happening. But the unfortunate part is on the governance, they are absolute zeros. And we just cannot perform in anything.
Very well said.
May I add something here?
Yes, go ahead.
May I just add something? Well, it is taking what Disha said, taking that forward is about shaming such people. Yogi Adityanath, very interestingly, he went about putting hoardings of those poor protesters who were fighting against the anti-CAA all over Lucknow, and they were and they very clearly said this fellow, and what they had done, their crime was that because they hit a stone, the windscreen of a police vehicle got damaged. So many lakhs he has to pay. Their properties were being attached. For them, he is ready to do that. Then one fine morning, when the rapes started increasing, a few days back, he said that, okay, now those guys accused of rape and gang rape and rape their hoardings will be put out in public. So somebody put out a hoarding of that. You remember that Unnao MLA, the BJP MLA, who was involved in that gang rape case, that Sengar, Kuldeep Singh Sengar, his hoarding, and that Chinmayan and that saffron-clad fellow in Shahjahanpur who was busy raping young girls in the college. Now, when somebody put out their hoardings, those poor chaps have been booked. A criminal case has been lodged against them for putting out these hoardings. These are the double standards. So what do you expect from them? This is what I wanted to point out. On one hand, he claims that let rapists be shown to public and shamed in public. But when somebody actually does it, then you don't like it because they happen to be your party leaders.
I want to take this back to Yogita Bhayana. Yogita, I've been listening very carefully, but I want to also remind our audience the reason why Yogita's voice is so important is because she works in the villages of the states that surround the city of Delhi. So she goes to Haryana, she goes to Uttar Pradesh. She goes to these places where women's rights are almost an unheard of thing. She's told me stories that we would never believe happen in this country. And it's important, like I keep saying, for us as an urban audience to believe what Yogita Bhayana tells us. Because when we turn our faces away and we only pay attention to cases that could be us, then we're doing a massive disservice to this country. Yogita, why do crimes like this take place?
Faye, of course, this is a very big question. Why it takes place? I would say lack of leadership. Now that we know they take place, somebody has to take the leadership. And unfortunately, surrounding states are Haryana. Haryana, it's like a mindset, patriarchal mindset. UP, patriarchal mindset, caste system. So these are so many complexities in our country. I'm not saying, I'm repeating it again. Go 10 kilometers ahead from my place right now where I am. I had adopted a village there. This caste system is so grave, I can't tell you. Nobody would believe it happens. They don't go meet each other. They don't go to each other's houses. There is so much of ego. And now coming back to the particular trauma what a family goes through, one of your viewer asked you in the question that what a family goes through. You remember that Rewari gang rape survivor? She had gone through so much of trauma, but she survived. Unlike this girl whom we have lost, but she survived. Now what she has survived, she's constantly under threat. Her mother calls me every single day. She has got security. We have we made sure that she gets the security, but still every now and then she is getting threats from the upper caste people because they are some other class and they are getting so much of pressure. Every single day, this lady cries. And when she was in ICU, this girl was in ICU, every top leader, from chief minister to opposition leader to all the big families, people, they were there in the hospital. But who's with them right now after 2.5 years? Nobody is giving attention. The media has stopped giving attention. This lady is all alone. She calls me, she cries. This, I mean, there is no lead to the case. There is no hope that they will get justice ever coming few years for sure. So, I mean, this is what is happening right under our nose. What can we tell the victims? They asked me, will you get us justice? I said, no, I can't get you justice. I promise to be with you. I promise to stand with you. But to promise you justice is another kind of a scam I'm committing to you. Another thing I wanted to point out, that this particular case, rather than going to the police station, if the rape crisis center in the hospitals, which were supposed to be operative after Nirbhaya's this thing, the fund is not utilized, the rape crisis centers are not set up. Why they had to go to police station? They could have straight away gone to a district hospital, which is supposed to have a rape crisis center. They didn't have to go to the police station, waste so much precious time, which she could have really got attention. And there was no need to kind of add the 376D later. They could have, why can't they delete the IPCs if they don't find them, correct right now? They should. So these are the things, I mean, it's like ABCD we are teaching them. I mean, it's actually frustrating. I echo with Trisha. I mean, it is frustrating to teach them like A, B, C, D. And how do they collect evidence in hospital? I have repeated it again in your on your show, that I have seen police collecting evidence in a polythene bag. They were just collecting it like, 3-year-old child was admitted. I was in the hospital with the child. The police teams comes and the IO picks up her undergarments in a polythene, and then she wraps it, and then she takes it for forensic, which takes another 1 year or 2 years. How will you expect justice?
Also, I mean, let me point out to our audience, the problem with evidence being collected in a plastic bag, I'm sorry about that, I'm working from home, evidence being collected in a plastic bag is that it gets contaminated. Phoebe, stop. And when it gets contaminated, the FSL or the forensics will not have proper DNA results. It won't hold up in court, and the entire case falls apart. So all of the case is dependent on the forensics. It's dependent on the DNA sampling. It's dependent on the integrity of the evidence that is collected, which is why it's a massive problem. I do know that both Trisha and Mr. Trisha Shetty and Mr. Azad want to come in. I have a question from an anonymous viewer who says, how do we dismantle the Savarna ignorance and impunity, including those who deny the caste angle in these times? Trisha, do you want to tackle that along with whatever it is you were planning on saying?
I think if you're listening to this, if you have your ear to the ground and you still choose to be ignorant, then you're part of the problem. I'm sorry. Like you want to come to the hospital and see the body. You want to come along to see what it's like when we actually go on ground to do the work that we do. Okay, as an experiment, then go stand outside a police station. Go to a government hospital. Every odd week there'll be a rape case that will happen. Go see it for yourself. I mean, what am I supposed to tell someone in terms of how to get rid of ignorance? Imagine the luxury of saying that, right? Explain to me, is it that bad? Imagine the luxury of saying that when it is so bad for people. Respectfully, I want to, Mr. Azad, I want to disagree with you when you said, it may happen with any other chief minister. I think my position, to be very clear, is I'm very against Ajay Bish and his governance, and I think he's a sham of a leader. Why? Because see, when we say change, he is the same person who said if Muslim women take one Hindu, Muslim men take one Hindu woman, we'll take hundreds of their women. He is the same person in whose presence another right-wing leader said we Hindu audiences should dig graves of Muslim women and then rape them, in whose presence the statement was said. So now you are such a chief minister occupying a position which the role of which mandates security coming under you, right? How will you serve and protect when you, in your very righteous bone, believe in a Gunda Raj? You see his interview from 2 days ago. He's saying, "Mere ko koi kuch karega, then I will slap the person back. This is the normal thing to do." The journalist is trying to tell him, "But what about law and order?" And he's saying, "What law and order? Law and order doesn't work." Your chief minister in itself is saying, "What law and order?" And if it still doesn't, quite seep in, I want to ask people in this, who is watching, can you imagine a reality where you are in a garden or walking down and doing a chore that you're doing with your family, and in a second your sister has been dragged away and you see her mutilated body? Because this is the reality of women in Uttar Pradesh. Which are not many states, there's rape, sexual abuse happening very many places. But I'll tell you, in all my years of working in Bombay, I've seen terrible cases. But this kind of besharmi is not there. Not just the besharmi, but the confidence that I'll get away with it.
Impunity.
Complete, like, matlab, I will get away with it. Matlab, humko bewakoof banana. It's that kind of, like, thukna citizens pe. And this is what's going on. So when this is happening, what can we do? Listen, you ask me what do the procedures. I strongly disagree with death penalty. I think it does not work. It's detrimental. We said this time and again. Money needs to be invested in fast track courts. Money needs to be invested in forensic labs. Women's safety helpline number doesn't work. You need to sensitize the police. The one-stop centers that Yogita was talking about in hospitals is supposed to take in all cases of rape, and there's procedure that happens that goes through a CMO, chief medical officer. That does not happen. You need enforcement of the same. You need to make sure police officers that don't file complaints, you can go to their superintendent and that the follow-up complaint is taken care of. I will say, if you tweet about a complaint, it's a lot more efficiently handled. I can tell you all of this, but listen, I've been saying this for 5-6 years. Every time I visit newsrooms, I keep saying this. Unfortunately, this is not the sexy talk that sells. Unfortunately, Fati pe chadao sells. So at this point, the only thing I come back to is we need to be very vocal about our anger. When Nirbhaya happened, we demanded for electoral change. We demanded for policy change. And people lost their positions of power because that was the outrage. I think here too, we can no more be like, what is this country? This is no country for women. Inko tum goli pe maar dena chahiye. What to do? Like, how much will we lament? It's our country too as women. So, we should be treated with some level of dignity here. I mean, it's unfortunate I'm saying some level. We have laws at our discourse. Who is going to hold it accountable for us? Celebrating the letter of the law while ignoring the spirit of it. That's what's happening here. So I will go back to being a broken record and say that we need to continue to shame because this government and politics, they only understand the language of shame. They don't understand any other language because they go so out of their way to sanitize their image that unko matlab, the besharmi with which they treat their citizens need to be highlighted. So we need to keep shaming them till they serve resignations and arrest warrants against the officers who were complicit in the murder. And I will go as far as a lawyer and as officer of the law to say that in the murder charge that's written, the police officers who were complicit in not providing the victim assistance and conducting dereliction of duty should also be included in the murder charge because they are complicit in the murder of the girl.
Absolutely.
She died 14 days later. There is enough accusations by the family that said it's not just the wound of the rape and the assault of the rape, it's also the lack of timely intervention that's caused her death. So the charge must include the police officers and every duty officer who failed to do his duty, which has caused the murder and rape of this girl. So that should also be another ask.
Now, before I go back to Mr. Azad, there are a couple of things I want to just read out for you. I've just pulled up cases of rape from the state of Uttar Pradesh in the month of September. This doesn't even go back beyond in the month of September, and I'm going to just read them out to you, and you can do this. All you need is a search engine. Google works just as well. September 4th, 3-year-old child raped and killed. Third such incident in Lakhimpur Kheri district in 20 days. Remember, we had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago. September 3rd, minor girl beaten with rods for resisting gang rape. The act was recorded on camera in Uttar Pradesh. September 2nd, 9-year-old girl missing, found dead, raped before murder in Mathura in Uttar Pradesh. September 13, 25-year-old man rapes a 70-year-old woman in Bhayana district of Uttar Pradesh. Now this final one that I want to read out for you. September 10th, Police sub-inspector allegedly tells a teenage rape victim to live with him if she wants justice in Uttar Pradesh's Bulandshahr. He was then suspended. Mr. Azad, something is seriously wrong with the police in Uttar Pradesh.
Something is wrong with the police, something is wrong with the society, the fault lines are too clear, something is wrong with the political leadership. I totally agree with you. But the Dalit women exploitation is not only a reality of UP, but runs across the country in various states. And I've, through my colleagues and through media men who are friends of mine, they bring to my attention such cases which are horrible. And this upper caste harassment of the Dalit women is also there in Madhya Pradesh, is also there in Bihar, is also there in so many other states. So what I'm saying is that how do you go about it? We can't wait for our social fault lines to change. It will take hundreds of years. I don't know when. So it has to be the law of the land which has to come immediately hard. And who will do that implementation? The implementation will have to be done by the local authorities. And that is why the governance has to be such that fearless leaders, the collectors, the SPs, the CEOs which have to be appointed. And as I've already maintained, governance, there is no premium. And unfortunately, the public never votes for governance on law and order or anything. Everything still on caste lines. You know, a good governance, police reform, and you had mentioned this, Faye, very rightly, people don't agitate for it. So this will continue unless we take very strong action against the policemen who have, because of their dereliction of duty, and basically try and firm up those even basic institutions which we had promised. For somebody to do, again, it will be incumbent on the local officers. Let Bisht and Yogi Adityanath keep on making all kinds of statements. And, you know, there should be a political, I totally agree with Trisha what she has to do at that level. But at this level, we'll have to do something very soon. And only then things will improve in the districts.
We've run out of time here, but while I thank my panelists, I'm just going to say this. On my YouTube channel, my attempt is to bring you information, no opinion from me, no outrage from me, no activism from me. This was my commitment to you when we started this YouTube channel. So unlike my previous avatar on television, I am not going to get upset. I'm going to handle my emotions, and I'm simply going to bring you the facts. The facts are that as citizens, we don't pay attention to police reform. We don't pay attention to transfers and movement of police officers and DGs and other people when it happens because we're busy with other things. We don't demand when we are voting women's safety, police reforms, better policing, because these are actually parts of government that really touch our lives. We don't demand that the caste system is actually removed from all aspects of crime, which means the police don't see caste because they're not supposed to. That crime, caste-based crime doesn't happen in this country. At the end of the day, as citizens, you have two things in your hand. One is your vote, but more importantly, your voice. You can read more about what happens in this country. Read about caste-based violence. Read about safety for women. Read about police reform. There's so much that you can read. Read about the laws that were changed after the Nirbhaya case, and why haven't they been implemented? Read about they're called Sakhi centers. There is money that has been set aside for them. Why hasn't it been used? Read about the fast track courts. Figure out what is going on. That will make you an empowered citizen. Empowered citizens cannot be shut down. Empowered and enlightened and knowledgeable citizens cannot be waylaid with nonsense arguments. Your empowerment is in your knowledge and in information, and nobody can take that away from you. If you are upset today, you possibly have every right to be. You remedy that by educating yourself, figuring out what is really going on, and figure out how you can solve that problem. I kept my promise to you. I did not let my emotions get the better of me. But I ask you one more time, listen to the voices on this panel, read about what is going on, and empower yourself to be a more informed citizen. Thanks for watching.